Imagine a land where gods walked among mortals, where philosophers questioned the very nature of existence, where warriors stood shoulder to shoulder at Thermopylae, and where the seeds of democracy, science, and art were sown. This is Greece, a civilization whose echoes still shape our world today. From the mysterious labyrinths of Knossos to the marble columns of the Parthenon, from the rise of city-states to the conquests of Alexander the Great, and from centuries of foreign rule to the birth of a modern nation, the story of Greece is a tale of resilience, brilliance, and transformation. Join me as we journey through the entire history of Greece, a saga that spans millennia and continues to inspire humanity. Long before the world knew the names of Athens or Sparta, before the myths of Zeus and Hera were whispered across the Aegean, the land that would become Greece was already alive with human activity. The story of Greece begins in the mists of prehistory, where the first settlers arrived, drawn by the promise of fertile land and the bounty of the sea. These early people, whose names are lost to time, left behind traces of their lives in the form of pottery, tools, and burial mounds. They were the first Greeks, though they would not have called themselves so. As the Neolithic era gave way to the Bronze Age, around 3000 BCE, a new chapter began. The islands of the Aegean, particularly Crete, became the cradle of one of Europe's earliest civilizations, the Minoans. The Minoans were master seafarers, traders, and artists. Their palaces, like the sprawling complex at Knossos, were marvels of architecture filled with vibrant frescoes depicting dolphins, bull leapers, and mysterious rituals. The Minoans worshipped a pantheon of gods and goddesses, and their society was remarkably advanced, with indoor plumbing, written records in the form of linear A script, and a complex social hierarchy. But the Minoans were not alone. On the mainland, another civilization was rising, the Mycenaeans. Named after their great citadel at Mycenae, these people were warriors and builders, their society centered around powerful kings who ruled from fortified palaces. The Mycenaeans adopted much from the Minoans, including their writing system, which they adapted into Linear B, but they were also distinct, with a culture steeped in heroism and warfare. It is from the Mycenaeans that we inherit the legends of Agamemnon, Achilles, and the Trojan War, stories immortalized centuries later by Homer. The Mycenaeans built massive stone walls known as Cyclopean masonry, and their tombs, like the beehive-shaped Tholos at Mycenae, were feats of engineering. They traded across the Mediterranean, their influence reaching as far as Egypt and the Near East. Yet, for all their power, the Mycenaeans were not invincible. Around 1200 BCE, their world began to unravel. The reasons remain a mystery, perhaps invasion, internal strife, or natural disaster. But the great palaces fell, and the Mycenaean civilization collapsed. This was the end of the Bronze Age, a time of darkness and uncertainty. Yet, even as the old world crumbled, the seeds of something new were being sown. The myths and memories of the Minoans and Mycenaeans would live on, passed down through generations, waiting to be reborn in the fires of a new age. The legacy of the Bronze Age Greeks is profound. They gave us the first glimpses of Greek religion, art, and social organization. Their stories, preserved in epic poetry and oral tradition, would become the foundation of Greek identity. The labyrinth of Knossos, the gold mask of Agamemnon, the tales of gods and heroes, all these are echoes of a distant past, reminders that the history of Greece is as much a story of myth as it is of fact. As the Bronze Age faded, Greece entered a period of decline, often called the Dark Ages. But even in darkness, the spark of Greek civilization endured. The people who survived the collapse of the Mycenaean world would eventually give rise to a new era, one that would see the birth of the city-state, the flowering of art and literature, and the dawn of democracy. The story of Greece was far from over. In many ways, it was just beginning. The Bronze Age Greeks were not isolated. They were part of a wider world, connected by trade and diplomacy to the great civilizations of Egypt, Mesopotamia, and Anatolia. The exchange of goods, ideas, and technologies helped shape the development of Greek society. The Minoans, for example, borrowed artistic motifs from Egypt and the Near East, while the Mycenaeans adopted chariot warfare and writing from their neighbors. This cosmopolitanism would become a hallmark of Greek civilization, a willingness to learn from others while forging a unique identity. Religion played a central role in Bronze Age Greece. The Minoans worshipped a mother goddess, often depicted with snakes, as well as a host of lesser deities. Their rituals were mysterious, involving processions, sacrifices, and possibly even human offerings. The Mycenaeans, too, had a rich religious life, with shrines and temples dedicated to gods who would later appear in the Greek pantheon: Zeus, Hera, Poseidon, and Athena. The continuity of religious practice from the Bronze Age to later periods is striking, suggesting a deep-rooted spiritual tradition. Art and architecture flourished in the Bronze Age. The Minoans created delicate pottery, intricate jewelry, and frescoes that captured the beauty of nature and the dynamism of human movement. Their palaces were centers of administration, religion, and culture, with labyrinthine corridors and grand courtyards. The Mycenaeans, by contrast, favored monumental architecture, massive walls, imposing gates, and richly decorated tombs. Their art was more martial, reflecting a society organized for war. The collapse of the Bronze Age was a turning point. The great palaces were abandoned, writing disappeared, and trade networks disintegrated. For centuries, Greece would be a land of small villages and scattered communities, struggling to survive in a world turned upside down. Yet the memory of the past endured. The stories of the heroes of Troy, the wisdom of the Minoan kings, the splendor of the Mycenaean palaces, these would be remembered, retold, and eventually written down. The first chapter of Greek history is a story of rise and fall, of innovation and catastrophe. It is a reminder that civilizations are fragile, but also resilient. The Greeks of the Bronze Age laid the foundations for all that was to come. Their achievements in art, architecture, religion, and storytelling would echo through the ages, shaping the destiny of a people who would one day change the world. As we leave the Bronze Age behind, we enter a new era, a time of darkness, but also of possibility. The stage is set for the emergence of the city-state, the birth of philosophy, and the rise of democracy. The journey of Greece is far from over. In fact, it is only just beginning. The collapse of the Mycenaean world was not just the end of an era, it was the beginning of a long, uncertain night. The palaces that once dominated the Greek landscape were abandoned, their walls crumbling, their treasures looted or lost. The art of writing, so recently acquired, vanished from daily life. Trade with distant lands dwindled, and the great networks that had connected Greece to the wider world fell silent. For centuries, the Greeks lived in the shadow of their own past, in a time historians would later call the Dark Ages. But darkness is never absolute. Even in the most difficult times, the embers of civilization smoldered, waiting for the right moment to flare back to life. The people of Greece did not disappear. They adapted, survived, and slowly began to rebuild. The villages that dotted the hills and valleys of the Greek mainland became the seeds of a new society. Families gathered around hearths, telling stories of gods and heroes, of lost kingdoms and distant wars. These stories, passed down from generation to generation, would become the backbone of Greek culture. The Dark Ages were a time of hardship, but also of transformation. The old ways were not forgotten, but they were reshaped by necessity. The great kings of Mycenae and Pylos were gone, replaced by local chieftains who ruled over small communities. The grand palaces were replaced by simple homes, the luxury goods of the past by the necessities of daily life. Yet even in this reduced world, the Greeks retained a sense of who they were. They remembered their ancestors, honored their gods, and clung to the hope that better days would come. One of the most remarkable features of this period was the persistence of oral tradition. With writing lost, the Greeks relied on memory and performance to keep their history alive. Bards and poets traveled from village to village, reciting epic tales of the past. The most famous of these stories would eventually be written down as the Iliad and the Odyssey, attributed to the legendary poet Homer. These epics, with their tales of war, adventure, and homecoming, captured the imagination of generations and became the foundation of Greek literature. The Iliad tells of the wrath of Achilles and the fall of Troy, a city whose ruins still lay buried on the coast of Asia Minor. The Odyssey follows the long journey of Odysseus as he struggles to return home from the war. These stories are more than just entertainment. They are windows into the values and beliefs of the early Greeks. They speak of honor and glory, of loyalty and cunning, of the power of fate and the will of the gods. Through these tales, the Greeks found meaning in their struggles and inspiration for the future. As the centuries passed, the darkness began to lift. Around the 9th century BCE, the Greeks began to rediscover the art of writing, this time using an alphabet borrowed from the Phoenicians. This new script was simpler and more flexible than the old linear B, and it quickly spread across the Greek world. With writing came the ability to record laws, treaties, and poetry to communicate across distances and to preserve knowledge for future generations. The Greeks were once again connected to the wider world, and their society began to flourish. The Archaic period, which began around 800 BCE, was a time of rapid change and innovation. The small villages of the Dark Ages grew into towns and cities, each with its own identity and traditions. The Greeks called these communities poleis, or city-states, and they became the defining feature of Greek civilization. Each polis was independent, governed by its own laws and customs, and often fiercely competitive with its neighbors. Yet, despite their differences, the Greeks shared a common language, religion, and sense of heritage. The rise of the city-state brought new forms of government and social organization. In some places, kings continued to rule, but in others, power shifted to councils of elders or assemblies of citizens. The Greeks experimented with different systems: oligarchy, tyranny, and most famously, democracy. The city of Athens would become the birthplace of democracy, where citizens gathered to debate and decide the affairs of the state. This was a radical idea, one that would shape the course of Western history. The Archaic period was also a time of colonization and expansion. As populations grew and resources became scarce, the Greeks looked beyond their own shores for new opportunities. They sailed across the Mediterranean and the Black Sea, founding colonies in Italy, Sicily, North Africa, and Asia Minor. These colonies spread Greek culture far and wide, creating a network of cities that shared language, religion, and customs. The Greeks called themselves Hellenes, and their world became known as Hellas. Trade flourished in this new age. Greek merchants exchanged olive oil, wine, and pottery for grain, metals, and luxury goods from Egypt, Phoenicia, and the Near East. The wealth generated by trade fueled the growth of cities and the rise of a new class of citizens: merchants, artisans, and craftsmen. The Greeks became skilled sailors and shipbuilders, their ships crisscrossing the seas in search of profit and adventure. Religion remained central to Greek life. The gods of Olympus, Zeus, Hera, Poseidon, Athena, Apollo, and the rest were worshipped in temples and at festivals. Each city had its own patron deity, and great games and competitions were held in their honor. The most famous of these was the Olympic Games, first held in 776 BCE at Olympia, in honor of Zeus. Athletes from across the Greek world gathered to compete in running, wrestling, and chariot racing, seeking glory for themselves and their cities. Art and architecture flourished in the Archaic period. The Greeks developed new styles of pottery, decorated with scenes from mythology and daily life. Sculptors began to create life-size statues of gods and heroes, capturing the beauty and strength of the human form. The first great temples were built, with columns and pediments that would become the hallmark of Greek architecture. The Greeks also made advances in science, mathematics, and philosophy, laying the groundwork for the achievements of the classical age. Society was changing too. The old aristocracies were challenged by the rise of new classes, and conflicts over land and power were common. In some cities, ambitious leaders seized control and ruled as tyrants, promising reforms and new opportunities for the common people. In others, the struggle for power led to the development of more inclusive forms of government. The Greeks were constantly experimenting, seeking the best way to organize their communities and ensure justice and stability. The archaic period was not without its challenges. Wars between city-states were frequent, and the Greeks faced threats from powerful neighbors, such as the Persians in the east. Yet these challenges also fostered a sense of unity and shared identity. The Greeks saw themselves as a unique people, bound together by language, religion, and tradition. They celebrated their achievements and remembered their heroes, drawing strength from their past as they faced the future. One of the most important developments of this period was the emergence of philosophy. The Greeks began to ask fundamental questions about the nature of the world, the meaning of life, and the best way to live. Thinkers like Thales, Anaximander, and Pythagoras sought to understand the universe through reason and observation, rather than myth and tradition. Their ideas would lay the foundation for the great philosophical schools of the classical age. The archaic period also saw the rise of lyric poetry, a new form of expression that focused on personal emotion and experience. Poets like Sappho and Alcaeus wrote about love, loss, and the beauty of the natural world, giving voice to the inner lives of the Greeks. Their poetry, often performed with music, was a vital part of social and religious life. By the end of the archaic period, Greece had been transformed. The darkness of the past had given way to a vibrant, dynamic society, rich in culture and innovation. The city-states were thriving, trade and colonization had spread Greek influence far and wide, and new forms of government and thought were taking root. The Greeks were poised on the brink of greatness, ready to enter the most celebrated era of their history, the classical age. The journey from the collapse of the Mycenaean world to the rise of the city-state was long and difficult, but it was also a time of renewal and creativity. The Greeks had survived the darkness, and in doing so they had forged a new identity, one that would shape the destiny of their people and leave an indelible mark on the world. As the sun rose on the 5th century BCE, the stage was set for the flowering of Greek civilization. The city-states of Athens, Sparta, Corinth, and Thebes would become the centers of art, philosophy, and political innovation. The Greeks would face new challenges and achieve new heights, their legacy echoing down through the ages. The story of Greece was far from over. In many ways, it was only just beginning. The dawn of the classical age in Greece was like the breaking of a new day after a long, uncertain night. The city-states, or polis, that had emerged from the darkness of the previous centuries were now vibrant, ambitious, and fiercely independent. Each polis was a world unto itself, with its own government, traditions, and rivalries. Yet, together, they would create a civilization whose achievements would echo through the ages. The classical age began with a challenge that would test the very survival of Greece: the Persian Wars. In the early 5th century BCE, the mighty Persian Empire, ruled by Darius and later his son Xerxes, sought to expand its dominion westward. The Greek cities of Ionia, on the coast of Asia Minor, had already fallen under Persian control, and their rebellion against the empire drew the attention and the wrath of the Persian kings. When Athens and Eretria sent aid to the Ionian rebels, they set in motion a chain of events that would shape the destiny of Greece. The first great clash came at Marathon in 490 BCE. The Persians landed a massive army on the plains near Athens, confident of an easy victory. But the Athenians, led by Miltiades, met them with courage and cunning. In a stunning upset, the smaller Greek force routed the Persians, sending them fleeing back to their ships. The legend of the runner who raced from Marathon to Athens to announce the victory, crying Nike, or victory, became immortal, the inspiration for the modern marathon race. But the Persian threat was not over. A decade later, Xerxes returned with an even larger army, determined to crush the Greeks once and for all. The city-states, often divided by rivalry and suspicion, now faced a choice: unite or perish. In a rare moment of solidarity, Athens, Sparta, and other cities formed an alliance to resist the invader. The stage was set for some of the most famous battles in history. At Thermopylae, a narrow pass between mountain and sea, a small force of Greeks led by King Leonidas of Sparta made a legendary stand against the Persian horde. For 3 days they held the pass, their courage buying precious time for the Greek cause. Though they were eventually overwhelmed, their sacrifice became a symbol of heroism and resistance. Meanwhile, the Athenians evacuated their city and lured the Persian fleet into the narrow straits of Salamis. There, the Greek navy, under the command of Themistocles, won a decisive victory, shattering the Persian armada. The following year, at Plataea, the Greeks defeated the Persian land forces, ending the immediate threat to their homeland. The Persian Wars were a turning point. The Greeks had faced the greatest empire of their time and emerged victorious. Their triumph was not just military, it was a victory for their way of life, for the ideals of freedom and self-government that set them apart from the autocratic empires of the East. The sense of shared purpose and destiny forged in these wars would shape the course of Greek history. In the aftermath of victory, Athens rose to new heights. Under the leadership of Pericles, the city entered its golden age, a period of extraordinary creativity and achievement. The Athenians rebuilt their city, constructing magnificent temples and public buildings. The Parthenon, dedicated to Athena, the city's patron goddess, crowned the Acropolis, its marble columns gleaming in the sun. Artists, sculptors, and architects transformed Athens into a showcase of beauty and harmony. But the achievements of Athens were not limited to stone and marble. The city became a center of learning, philosophy, and the arts. Playwrights like Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides brought the myths and dilemmas of the human condition to life on the stage, inventing the art of drama. Historians like Herodotus and Thucydides pioneered the study of the past, seeking to understand not just what happened but why. Philosophers like Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle asked profound questions about truth, justice, and the nature of reality, laying the foundations of Western thought. Democracy flourished in Athens, though it was far from perfect by modern standards. All male citizens could participate in the assembly, debating and voting on the laws that governed their city. The system was radical for its time, giving ordinary people a voice in their own affairs. Yet it was also exclusive. Women, slaves, and foreigners were denied citizenship and its privileges. Still, the idea that power should rest with the people, not a king or tyrant, was revolutionary. Athens' power and prosperity, however, bred envy and fear among its rivals, especially Sparta. The two cities were as different as night and day. Athens was a democracy, a naval power, and a center of culture and trade. Sparta was a militaristic oligarchy, its society organized for war, its citizens trained from childhood to be soldiers. The rivalry between Athens and Sparta simmered for decades, erupting at last into open conflict, the Peloponnesian War. The Peloponnesian War, which raged from 431 to 404 BCE, was a brutal struggle that pitted Greek against Greek. The war was fought not just on the battlefield, but in the hearts and minds of the people. Alliances shifted, cities changed sides, and the fabric of Greek society was torn apart. The war saw moments of heroism and treachery, of hope and despair. The plague that struck Athens, killing Pericles and thousands of others, was a grim reminder of the fragility of human life. In the end, Sparta emerged victorious, but the cost was immense. The Greek world was exhausted, its cities weakened and divided. The dream of unity and greatness seemed shattered. Yet, even in defeat, the spirit of Greece endured. The arts, philosophy, and science continued to flourish, and new leaders would soon rise to carry the torch of Hellenic civilization. One of the most remarkable figures of this era was Socrates, the philosopher who wandered the streets of Athens, questioning everyone he met. Socrates believed that wisdom began with recognizing one's own ignorance, and he challenged his fellow citizens to examine their lives and beliefs. His method of questioning, the Socratic method, became a cornerstone of Western education. Socrates' refusal to compromise his principles, even in the face of death, made him a martyr for the cause of truth and reason. Socrates' student Plato founded the Academy, the first institution of higher learning in the Western world. Plato's writings explored the nature of reality, the ideal state, and the immortality of the soul. His student Aristotle would go on to study everything from logic and ethics to biology and politics, laying the groundwork for centuries of scientific and philosophical inquiry. The classical age was also a time of scientific discovery. Hippocrates, the father of medicine, sought to understand disease as a natural phenomenon, not a punishment from the gods. Mathematicians like Euclid and Pythagoras explored the mysteries of numbers and geometry. Astronomers charted the stars, and engineers built machines and devices that amazed the ancient world. Yet, for all their achievements, the Greeks were not immune to the forces of change. In the north, a new power was rising: Macedon. Under King Philip II, the Macedonians transformed their kingdom into a formidable military machine. Philip's reforms, professionalizing the army, introducing new tactics, and forging alliances, made Macedon the dominant force in Greece. In 338 BCE, at the Battle of Chaeronea, Philip defeated the combined armies of Athens and Thebes, bringing the Greek city-states under his control. Philip's assassination in 336 BCE brought his son, Alexander, to the throne. Alexander the Great was one of history's most extraordinary figures, a brilliant general, a visionary leader, and a man driven by an insatiable desire for glory. In a few short years, Alexander would change the world. Alexander set out to fulfill his father's dream of conquering the Persian Empire. In a series of lightning campaigns, he defeated the Persian armies at Granicus, Issus, and Gaugamela. He marched his army across Asia Minor, Egypt, Mesopotamia, and into the heart of Persia, capturing the great cities of Babylon, Susa, and Persepolis. Alexander's conquests did not stop there. He pushed on into Central Asia and India, reaching the edge of the known world. Everywhere he went, Alexander spread Greek culture, founding cities that became centers of learning and trade. He encouraged the mingling of Greek and local customs, creating a new cosmopolitan world. The Hellenistic age, which followed Alexander's death, would see Greek ideas and influence spread from the Mediterranean to the borders of India. But Alexander's empire was short-lived. In 323 BCE, at the age of just 32, he died in Babylon, his cause of death still a mystery. His generals, the Diadochi, carved up his empire, each seeking to rule a piece of the vast territory he had conquered. The unity of Greece was lost, but the legacy of the classical age endured. The classical age of Greece was a time of unparalleled achievement and profound change. The Greeks faced challenges from within and without, yet they responded with creativity, courage, and a relentless pursuit of excellence. They invented new forms of government, explored the deepest questions of existence, and created works of art and literature that still inspire us today. The story of classical Greece is a story of triumph and tragedy, of glory and loss. It is the story of a people who, for a brief moment in history, reached for the stars, and in doing so, changed the world forever. The death of Alexander the Great in 323 BCE was like the sudden extinguishing of a brilliant flame. In just over a decade, he had conquered the greatest empire the world had ever seen, stretching from the mountains of Macedonia to the banks of the Indus River. But Alexander left no clear heir, and his generals, known as the Diadochi, or successors, were left to carve up his vast realm. The unity of his empire dissolved almost overnight, replaced by a patchwork of rival kingdoms, each ruled by ambitious men who had once fought at Alexander's side. Yet, even as the political map of the ancient world fractured, something remarkable was happening. The conquest of Alexander had unleashed a tidal wave of Greek culture, language, and ideas across the lands he had conquered. This was the beginning of the Hellenistic age, a time when Greek civilization would blend with the traditions of Egypt, Persia, and the East, creating a new cosmopolitan world. The Hellenistic kingdoms were grand in scale and ambition. The most powerful were the Ptolemaic dynasty in Egypt, the Seleucid Empire in Asia, and the Antigonid dynasty in Macedonia. Each kingdom was ruled by a Greek-speaking elite, but their subjects were a mix of peoples, languages, and religions. The rulers of these kingdoms styled themselves as god-kings, adopting the trappings of Eastern monarchy while maintaining the traditions of their Greek heritage. In Egypt, the Ptolemies built a new capital at Alexandria, a city that would become the greatest metropolis of the ancient world. Alexandria was a marvel, a city of wide boulevards, grand temples, and bustling markets. Its most famous landmark was the Lighthouse of Pharos, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, guiding ships safely into the harbor. But Alexandria's true glory was its library, a vast repository of knowledge that attracted scholars from every corner of the Mediterranean. Here, poets, philosophers, and scientists gathered to study, debate, and create. The Library of Alexandria became a symbol of the Hellenistic spirit, a place where the wisdom of Greece, Egypt, Persia, and beyond could mingle and grow. The Hellenistic world was a place of dazzling diversity. Greek became the language of government, trade, and culture, but local traditions persisted and flourished. In the cities, Greek-style theaters, gymnasiums, and temples stood alongside ancient shrines and monuments. The gods of Greece were worshipped, alongside the deities of Egypt, Mesopotamia, and Persia, creating a rich tapestry of religious life. New cults and philosophies emerged, offering comfort and guidance in a world that seemed ever more complex and uncertain. Art and science reached new heights in the Hellenistic age. Sculptors created works of breathtaking realism and emotion, capturing the beauty and drama of the human experience. The famous statue of the winged victory of Samothrace, with its billowing drapery and sense of movement, is a masterpiece of Hellenistic art. Painters experimented with perspective and light, while architects designed grand buildings and monuments that pushed the limits of engineering. Science flourished as never before. In Alexandria, the mathematician Euclid wrote his Elements, a work that would shape the study of geometry for centuries. Archimedes, working in Syracuse, made discoveries in physics and engineering that astonished his contemporaries. Astronomers like Aristarchus and Eratosthenes measured the size of the Earth and proposed that the Sun, not the Earth, was at the center of the universe. Medicine advanced as well, with doctors like Herophilus and Erasistratus conducting dissections and studying the workings of the human body. Philosophy, too, adapted to the new realities of the Hellenistic world. The old certainties of the city-state had given way to a more cosmopolitan, uncertain existence. New schools of thought emerged, offering ways to find happiness and meaning in a changing world. The Stoics, founded by Zeno of Citium, taught that virtue and wisdom were the keys to a good life, and that one should accept fate with calm and courage. The Epicureans, led by Epicurus, argued that pleasure, understood as the absence of pain, was the highest good, and that one should seek tranquility through friendship, knowledge, and moderation. The skeptics questioned whether true knowledge was possible at all, urging their followers to suspend judgment and live in accordance with nature. The Hellenistic world was a place of opportunity and mobility. Greek cities sprang up across the east, from Egypt to Afghanistan, attracting settlers, merchants, and adventurers. Soldiers of fortune found employment in the armies of the successor kings, while traders grew rich on the exchange of goods from every corner of the known world. The Silk Road linking China to the Mediterranean began to take shape, bringing new products and ideas to the Hellenistic kingdoms. Yet, for all its achievements, the Hellenistic world was also a place of conflict and instability. The successor kings were constantly at war, seeking to expand their territories and secure their thrones. The great battles of Ipsus, Raphia, and Magnesia were fought by armies of unprecedented size, with elephants, cavalry, and phalanxes clashing in bloody contests for supremacy. Cities rose and fell, fortunes were made and lost, and the lives of ordinary people were often caught in the crossfire. In Greece itself, the old city-states struggled to maintain their independence in the face of Macedonian dominance. The Antigonid kings ruled from Pella, but their authority was often challenged by leagues and alliances of cities seeking to restore their autonomy. The Aetolian and Achaean leagues, federations of city-states, emerged as powerful players, sometimes cooperating with the Macedonians, sometimes opposing them. The spirit of the polis endured, but the age of the independent city-state was fading. Religion in the Hellenistic world was both traditional and innovative. The old gods of Olympus were still worshipped, but new cults and mysteries gained popularity. The cult of Serapis, a fusion of Greek and Egyptian deities, became widespread in Egypt and beyond. The mysteries of Isis and Mithras promised salvation and eternal life to their initiates, offering hope in a world of uncertainty. Astrology, magic, and oracles flourished as people sought to understand and influence the forces that shaped their destinies. The Hellenistic Age was also a time of cultural exchange and synthesis. Greek artists and craftsmen adopted techniques and motifs from Egypt, Persia, and India, creating new styles and forms. Literature reflected the diversity of the age, with poets like Callimachus and Theocritus exploring new themes and genres. The novel, a new literary form, emerged, telling stories of adventure, romance, and the search for meaning in a vast and complex world. Women in the Hellenistic world enjoyed greater freedom and visibility than in earlier times. Queens like Arsinoe II and Cleopatra VII of Egypt wielded real power, ruling as co-regents or even sole monarchs. Women could own property, run businesses, and participate in religious and cultural life. The image of the educated, independent woman became a common theme in literature and art, reflecting the changing realities of the age. Despite its achievements, the Hellenistic world was not immune to decline. The constant wars between the successor kingdoms weakened their power and drained their resources. In the West, a new power was rising, the Roman Republic. The Romans, disciplined and ambitious, began to expand their influence into the Greek world, first as allies, then as conquerors. The first major clash came in 197 BCE, when the Romans defeated the Macedonian king Philip V at the Battle of Cynocephaly. The Romans presented themselves as liberators, promising to restore the freedom of the Greek cities. But their intervention marked the beginning of the end for Greek independence. Over the next century, Rome would steadily tighten its grip on the Hellenistic world, defeating the Seleucids at Magnesia, crushing the Macedonian monarchy, and finally, in 146 BCE, destroying the city of Corinth and making Greece a province of the Roman Republic. The fall of Corinth was a symbolic moment, the end of an era. The proud, independent city-states of Greece were now subject to foreign rule. Yet, even in defeat, the legacy of the Hellenistic world endured. Greek culture, language, and ideas continued to flourish under Roman rule, shaping the civilization of the Mediterranean for centuries to come. The Hellenistic Age was a time of transformation, a bridge between the world of the city-state and the vast empires that would follow. It was an age of exploration and discovery, of cultural exchange and innovation. The Greeks of the Hellenistic world were citizens of a new, interconnected age, their achievements laying the foundations for the world we know today. As the Roman legions marched into Greece, the story of the Greeks entered a new chapter. Their cities would become centers of learning and culture in the Roman Empire. Their philosophers would teach emperors, and their art and literature would inspire generations to come. The dream of Alexander, the dream of a world united by Greek culture and ideas, did not die with him. It lived on, transformed and renewed, in the hearts and minds of all who came after. The fall of Constantinople in 1453 was a cataclysm for the Greek world. The city that had been the heart of the Byzantine Empire, the queen of cities, was now the jewel of the Ottoman sultans. The cross was replaced by the crescent. The great church of Hagia Sophia became a mosque, and the last emperor, Constantine III, became a legend, a martyr for a lost world. For the Greeks, it was the end of an era, but not the end of their story. Instead, it marked the beginning of a long, difficult journey through centuries of foreign rule, a journey defined by endurance, faith, and the unquenchable hope of freedom. Under Ottoman rule, the Greeks became a subject people, part of a vast, multi-ethnic empire that stretched from the gates of Vienna to the deserts of Arabia. The Ottomans governed their Christian subjects through the millet system, allowing the Greek Orthodox Church to survive and even flourish as the spiritual and administrative leader of the Greek people. The ecumenical patriarch in Constantinople became both a religious and a political figure, responsible for the welfare of the Orthodox flock. In the villages and towns, the church kept alive the Greek language, traditions, and sense of identity. Life under the Ottomans was a mixture of hardship and adaptation. The Greeks paid heavy taxes and were subject to the whims of local officials. The devshirme, or child levy, took Christian boys from their families to be raised as Muslim soldiers, the feared janissaries. Yet the Greeks also found ways to survive and even prosper. Some became merchants and ship owners, trading across the Mediterranean and Black Sea. Others rose to positions of influence as dragomans, interpreters, or as phanariots, the Greek elite of Constantinople who served as diplomats and administrators for the sultans. In the mountains and islands, far from the centers of Ottoman power, the Greeks maintained a degree of autonomy. The klepts, bandits and rebels, became folk heroes, symbols of resistance against oppression. Their exploits were celebrated in songs and stories, keeping alive the dream of freedom. Secret schools, or krypho skoleo, were said to teach Greek language and history, though historians debate how widespread or necessary they really were. What is certain is that the memory of the ancient and Byzantine past was never forgotten. The centuries of Ottoman rule were also a time of cultural and religious resilience. The Orthodox Church preserved the traditions of Byzantine art, music, and theology. Monasteries like those at Mount Athos and Meteora became centers of learning and spiritual life. The Greek language evolved, absorbing Turkish, Italian, and Slavic words, but remained the thread that connected the people to their ancient heritage. By the 18th century, the winds of change were blowing across Europe. The Enlightenment, with its ideals of liberty, equality, and national identity, began to inspire Greeks as well. Greek merchants and intellectuals, traveling in the cities of Western Europe, encountered new ideas and brought them home. Secret. Societies like the Philiki Friendly Society, were formed, dedicated to the cause of Greek independence. The dream of a free Greece, once a distant hope, began to take shape as a real possibility. The spark that ignited the Greek War of Independence came in 1821. Across the Peloponnese, in the islands, and in the mountains, Greeks rose in revolt against their Ottoman rulers. The struggle was brutal and often desperate, marked by acts of heroism and tragedy. The massacre at Chios, where thousands of Greeks were killed or enslaved, shocked Europe and inspired artists and writers to rally to the Greek cause. Lord Byron, the English poet, traveled to Greece and died fighting for its freedom, becoming a symbol of international support. The war was long and bitter, but the Greeks were determined. They fought not just for themselves, but for the memory of their ancestors and the hope of a new future. The intervention of the great powers, Britain, France, and Russia, turned the tide. In 1827, their fleets destroyed the Ottoman Egyptian navy at the Battle of Navarino, paving the way for Greek victory. In 1830, the independence of Greece was recognized by the Treaty of London. A new state was born, small and fragile, but free at last. The early years of the Greek kingdom were difficult. The new state was poor, its borders limited, and its people divided by regional and political rivalries. The first king, Otto of Bavaria, was a foreigner, and his rule was marked by unrest and dissatisfaction. Yet, the Greeks persevered. They built a new capital at Athens, a city that had been little more than a village, and began to reclaim their ancient heritage. The Parthenon, long neglected, became a symbol of national pride. Throughout the 19th and early 20th centuries, the Greeks sought to expand their state and unite all Greeks under one flag, a vision known as the Megali Idea, or Great Idea. Wars with the Ottomans, the Balkan Wars, and World War I brought new territories, Thessaly, Epirus, Macedonia, Crete, and the Aegean Islands, into the Greek fold. The dream of reclaiming Constantinople, however, remained elusive. The disastrous Greco-Turkish War of 1919–1922 ended with the burning of Smyrna and the forced exchange of populations between Greece and Turkey. Hundreds of thousands of Greeks fled Asia Minor, bringing with them their memories, songs, and traditions. The 20th century was a time of both triumph and tragedy for Greece. The country endured occupation and resistance during World War II, suffering terrible losses at the hands of the Nazis. The end of the war brought not peace, but civil war, as Greeks fought each other over the future of their country. The scars of that conflict would linger for decades. Yet Greece emerged from the darkness. The post-war years saw economic growth, modernization, and the rebuilding of cities and infrastructure. In 1981, Greece joined the European Community, later, the European Union, marking its return to the heart of Europe. The Olympic Games, born in ancient Olympia, returned to Athens in 2004, a symbol of the enduring spirit of the Greek people. Modern Greece is a country of contrasts, ancient and modern, traditional and cosmopolitan. The ruins of the past stand alongside bustling cities. The rhythms of village life coexist with the pace of the global economy. The Greek Orthodox Church remains a powerful force, shaping the values and identity of the nation. Festivals, music, and dance celebrate the rich tapestry of Greek culture, from the islands of the Aegean to the mountains of the north. The challenges of the 21st century are real. Economic crises, political turmoil, and the pressures of migration and globalization have tested the resilience of the Greek people. Yet the Greeks have faced adversity before. Their history is a testament to endurance, creativity, and the power of hope. Today, Greece is a democracy, a member of the European Union and NATO, a crossroads of cultures and ideas. Its universities, museums, and theaters are centers of learning and creativity. Greek scientists, artists, and writers contribute to the global conversation, drawing on a heritage that stretches back thousands of years. The legacy of Greece is everywhere. The words of Homer and Plato, the columns of the Parthenon, the music of the bouzouki, the taste of olive oil and wine, all are gifts from a people who have shaped the world in ways both great and small. The story of Greece is not just the story of a nation, but of an idea, a belief in the power of reason, the value of freedom, and the beauty of the human spirit. As the sun sets over the Aegean, casting its golden light on the ruins of ancient temples and the whitewashed houses of the islands, the story of Greece continues. It is a story of loss and renewal, of struggle and triumph, of a people who have endured the storms of history and emerged time and again to claim their place in the world. From the labyrinths of Knossos to the streets of modern Athens, from the glory of the Parthenon to the resilience of the villages, the journey of Greece is a journey of the human spirit. It is a story that belongs to all of us, a reminder that, no matter how dark the night, the dawn will come, and the light of hope will never be extinguished. The year 146 BCE marked a profound turning point in the history of Greece. The once proud city-states, whose names had echoed across the world, now lay under the shadow of a new and relentless power: Rome. The sack of Corinth by the Roman general Lucius Mummius was both a symbol and a reality, the end of Greek independence and the beginning of a new era. Yet, as the dust settled and the legions marched home, the story of Greece was far from over. Instead, it was about to enter a long and complex chapter, one that would see the Greeks both conquered and conquerors, both subjects and shapers of a new world. Under Roman rule, Greece became part of the province of Achaia, its cities governed by Roman officials and its people subject to Roman law. At first, the Greeks chafed under foreign domination. The memory of their lost freedom was bitter, and the taxes and demands of the Roman governors were heavy. Yet the Romans were not mere conquerors. They were also admirers and imitators of Greek culture. To be educated in Rome was to be educated in Greek philosophy, literature, and art. The Roman elite sent their sons to Athens to study rhetoric and philosophy, and Greek tutors were prized in every noble household. The cities of Greece, though diminished, remained centers of learning and culture. Athens, with its ancient schools and storied past, became a magnet for students from across the empire. The Academy of Plato and the Lyceum of Aristotle continued to teach the wisdom of the ancients, while new schools of thought flourished. The Stoics, Epicureans, and skeptics all found followers among the Romans, who saw in Greek philosophy a guide to life and government. The Romans also left their mark on the Greek landscape. They built roads, aqueducts, and public buildings, transforming the cities and countryside. The great theaters and temples of the past were joined by new structures: baths, forums, and amphitheaters, where Greeks and Romans mingled in daily life. The city of Corinth, rebuilt by Julius Caesar, became one of the wealthiest and most cosmopolitan cities in the eastern Mediterranean. Yet, beneath the surface, Greek identity endured. The language, customs, and traditions of the Greeks persisted, even as they adapted to the realities of Roman rule. The Greeks became adept at navigating the complexities of empire, serving as administrators, teachers, and merchants throughout the Roman world. In many ways, the Greeks were the cultural heart of the empire, their ideas and achievements shaping the civilization of Rome itself. The most profound transformation of this era, however, was not political or cultural, but spiritual. In the 1st century CE, a new faith began to spread across the Roman world, a faith that would change the course of history: Christianity. The message of Jesus of Nazareth, preached by his followers, found fertile ground in the cities of Greece. Paul the Apostle traveled to Athens, Corinth, Thessalonica, and other cities, establishing Christian communities and writing letters that would become part of the New Testament. The Greeks, with their long tradition of philosophical inquiry and religious debate, were both receptive and skeptical. Some embraced the new faith, seeing in it a fulfillment of their deepest hopes and questions. Others resisted, clinging to the old gods and the rituals of the past. For centuries, Christianity and paganism coexisted, sometimes in harmony, often in conflict. Temples were converted into churches, statues of the gods were defaced or destroyed, and the old festivals were given new meanings. By the 4th century, Christianity had triumphed. The Emperor Constantine, himself a product of the Greek-speaking Eastern Empire, embraced the new faith and made it the official religion of Rome. In 330 CE, Constantine founded a new capital on the site of the ancient Greek city of Byzantium, renaming it Constantinople. This city, straddling the boundary between Europe and Asia, would become the heart of a new empire, the Byzantine Empire, or Eastern Roman Empire. The Byzantine Empire was, in many ways, a Greek empire. Its language was Greek, its culture a blend of Hellenic and Roman traditions, its religion the Orthodox Christianity that had taken root in the cities and villages of Greece. The Byzantines saw themselves as the heirs of both Rome and Greece, guardians of a civilization that stretched back to Homer and Plato. Constantinople was a city of wonders, a place of soaring domes, glittering mosaics, and bustling markets. The Hagia Sophia, built by the Emperor Justinian in the 6th century, was the greatest church in Christendom, its vast dome seeming to float above the city like a vision of heaven. The city was a center of learning, art, and diplomacy, its scholars preserving and transmitting the knowledge of the ancient world. The Byzantine emperors ruled over a vast and diverse realm, stretching from the Balkans to the Middle East, from the shores of the Black Sea to the deserts of Egypt. Their power was both absolute and precarious, challenged by internal revolts, foreign invasions, and the ambitions of rival nobles. The empire was a mosaic of peoples and faiths, united by loyalty to the emperor and the Orthodox Church. For the Greeks, life under Byzantium was both familiar and strange. The old city-states were gone, replaced by provinces and themes governed by imperial officials. The rhythms of daily life were shaped by the Church, with its cycle of feasts and fasts, its rituals and processions. Monasteries dotted the landscape, centers of prayer, learning, and charity. The icons of Christ, the Virgin Mary, and the saints watched over homes and churches, their serene faces a reminder of the divine presence in the world. Yet, the Greeks were not mere subjects. They were the heart and soul of the empire. Greek was the language of administration, literature, and theology. The great councils of the Church, where the doctrines of Christianity were debated and defined, were held in Greek cities and attended by Greek bishops. The works of Homer, Plato, and Aristotle were copied and studied in the monasteries and schools of Byzantium, their wisdom shaping the thought of generations. The Byzantine Empire was a world of contrasts, of splendor and poverty, faith and doubt, stability and crisis. The empire faced constant threats from without: the Persians, the Arabs, the Bulgars, the Slavs, and later the Turks. The city of Constantinople was besieged many times, its walls standing as a symbol of resilience and hope. The empire waxed and waned, sometimes expanding, sometimes shrinking, but always enduring. The Greeks of Byzantium were also great builders and artists. The mosaics of Ravenna, the frescoes of the monasteries of Meteora, and the icons of Mount Athos are among the treasures of world art. Byzantine music, with its haunting chants and hymns, filled the churches with a sense of the sacred. The law, codes of Justinian, the chronicles of Procopius, and the theological writings of the Church Fathers are monuments of learning and faith. Yet, for all its achievements, the Byzantine Empire was not immune to decline. The empire was weakened by internal strife, economic difficulties, and the relentless pressure of its enemies. The Fourth Crusade in 1204 dealt a devastating blow as Western knights sacked Constantinople and established a short-lived Latin empire. The Greeks retreated to the provinces, preserving their culture and faith in the face of adversity. In 1261, the Byzantines recaptured Constantinople, but the empire was a shadow of its former self. The Turks, under the leadership of the Ottoman sultans, advanced steadily, conquering the lands of Asia Minor and the Balkans. The Greeks fought bravely, but their resources were exhausted, their allies few. The final act came in 1453. The Ottoman army, led by Sultan Mehmed II, laid siege to Constantinople. For weeks, the defenders held out, their courage and faith undiminished. On May 29th, the city fell. The last emperor, Constantine the XIII Palaiologos, died fighting on the walls, his fate a symbol of the end of an era. The fall of Constantinople was a tragedy for the Greeks, but it was not the end of their story. The city became the new capital of the Ottoman Empire, its churches converted into mosques, its people scattered or enslaved. Yet the memory of Byzantium endured, a beacon of hope and identity for Greeks everywhere. Throughout the long centuries of Roman and Byzantine rule, the Greeks had adapted, survived, and preserved their heritage. They had shaped the culture of Rome, given birth to the Christian faith, and created an empire that stood for 1,000 years. Their language, art, and ideas continued to inspire the world, even as their political power waned. The story of Greece was not over. In the villages and monasteries, in the songs and stories of the people, the spirit of Hellas lived on. The Greeks would endure centuries of foreign rule, but they would never forget who they were. The dream of freedom, the memory of their ancient glory, and the hope of renewal would sustain them through the darkest times. As the Ottoman banners flew over Constantinople, the Greeks looked to the future with sorrow and determination. Their history was a tapestry of triumph and tragedy, of loss and resilience. The world had changed, but the Greeks remained, guardians of a legacy that would one day rise again.